Bible talks about a sacred secret. If I asked you to explain in your own words off the top of your head what the sacred secret is, would you be able to do it? Being a Jehovah's Witness for over 20 years and going to many churches afterwards, I have never heard anybody clearly explain what the sacred secret is. I know that it has something to do with Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. But as for the actual secret, I wouldn't be able to explain the secret part. In the Jehovah's Witness Bible, in the appendix under B1, it has this timeline here of and a chart of pictures here. It has Adam and Eve. Then it has the covenant with Abraham where the seed is promised. Then it has David where the seed is reaffirmed. The baptism of Christ, Jesus being the seed foretold of Genesis 3:15. The death of Christ where the devil bruises Jesus in the heel. The casting out of Satan, the dragon, 1914. And then it has Jesus Christ here ruling in heaven, where he crushes the devil, bruises where he's bruised in the head. I'm going to read Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. This is where Jehovah is speaking to the devil after Adam and Eve sinned. He says, "And I shall put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will bruise you in the head, and you will bruise him in the heel." So going further in our discussion of whether or not Jehovah knew that Adam would sin, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jehovah's original purpose was altered with the sin of Adam and Eve. That now wickedness would be introduced through their offspring. Now that free will was being misused. Now there would have to be the ransom sacrifice of Jesus Christ. All this was new, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, that this was never Jehovah's original will and purpose. Jehovah's will and purpose got amended, diverted. But it's interesting when you read this sacred secret in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, that this involves the 144,000. This is, at this point, after the sin, Jehovah's not only arranged for Jesus Christ to be the ransom sacrifice, but he's arranged for the 144,000 to be co-rulers with Jesus Christ. And he's not only predestined the success of Jesus Christ, he's predestined beyond the 1,000-year reign of Christ, where Satan is actually bruised in the head. The second death, the lake of fire. Revelation, I believe it's chapter 22, speaks of where this, Satan's let loose out of the abyss, and then he's given the death blow. So this is how many thousand years? 6,000 years of mankind plus 1,000. So this is over 7,000 years in advance that Jehovah is speaking about. Back to the reasoning from the Scriptures book. On page 143, it says, "Does not the Apostle Paul speak of Christians as being predestined?" And I'm going to read some of these verses. Romans chapter 8, verse 29. "For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers." Ephesians chapter 1, verses 4 and 5. "Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him. In love he predestined us for adoption as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will." Before the foundation of the world. In our last discussion, we were looking at Job chapter 38, verses 4 and 7, where Jehovah founded the earth, and all the sons of God in heaven applauded. Ephesians chapter 1 says that he chose us before the foundation of the world. When was the foundation of the world? We're going to look at that in a second. We'll look at a few more verses here. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. "In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will." It's also very interesting that the words purpose and will are linked together with the predestination of this seed, the seed of the woman, these anointed ones. So, looking at Jehovah's original purpose and his will, was it altered by Adam? 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9. "Who saved us and called us to a holy calling, not because of our works, but because of his own purpose and grace, which he gave us in Christ Jesus before the ages began." Before the ages began. Is that before Adam and Eve sinned? First Peter 1, verse 20. "He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you." Revelation 13, verse 8. "And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain." So it speaks of a book of life where names, individual names, are written down before the foundation of the world. Second Timothy chapter 2, verse 19. "But God's firm foundation stands, bearing this seal: the Lord knows those who are his. And let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity." So it talks about a seal and that the Lord knows those who are his. Did Jehovah know that Adam was his? So going back to the question in the reasoning book, page 143, does not the Apostle Paul speak of Christians as being predestined before the foundation of the world. And this is the answer it gives. If the individuals were predestined to salvation, they could not possibly fail, regardless of what they did. Since effort is required on the part of the individuals, it must be the class that is foreordained. God purposed that the entire class would conform to the pattern set by Jesus Christ. Those selected by God to be part of that class, however, must prove faithful if they are actually to attain the reward set before them. So it's talking about a class of 144,000 is predestined, but not the individuals. But we just read Revelation chapter 13, verse 8, where the book of life has individual names. How can you put names if it's a class? And if it's a class, is that really predestination? Doesn't it just sound like a plan or an arrangement? It goes on, it says, it's noteworthy that at Luke chapter 11, verses 15, verse 51, Jesus parallels the foundation of the world with the time of Abel. Abel's the first human who continued to have God's favor throughout his life. Thus, it was after the rebellion of Eden, but before the conception of Abel, that God formed his purpose to produce a seed through which deliverance would be provided. So do you see what they're saying here is that Genesis 3 verse 15, the idea of a seed, this whole new plan, this whole amendment was completely brand new. Because, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, Jehovah did not know that Adam would sin. The whole idea of a ransom, a redeemer, was brand new. God purposed that associated with the principal seed, Jesus Christ, would be a group of faithful followers who would share with him in the new covenant. So it's going on about the 144,000. When thinking back, the Bible doesn't tell us a lot about the situation, how Satan originated. Like with Job, the situation of Job, there's a conversation between Satan and Jehovah God in Job chapter 2, where Jehovah is accusing the motives of Job's integrity to God. And Jehovah grants Satan authorization to harass him, to kill his family, to torment him. He's given permission by Jehovah himself. But with regards to Adam and Eve, the Bible doesn't give us a lot of detail as to as to Satan beforehand. Was there a conversation with the devil saying where I can turn these humans aside? We're just sort of put into the Garden of Eden where Satan as a serpent is approaching Adam and Eve. We don't even know where Satan really, the moment where Satan becomes Satan. Had he already become Satan in heaven? Did he already start to have followers? Or was this all brand new? brand new in the Garden of Eden. I'm mentioning this because the origin of evil, if Satan became Satan in heaven, way before actually approaching Adam and Eve, and actually had a conversation with Jehovah, that means evil is already in the universe. Sin is already in the universe. If and if so, how is that altering Jehovah's will and purpose? Did he foresee that? I hope you're able to follow what I'm saying here. So it says it's noteworthy that let me stop for a second here. So I'm going to read Luke chapter 11, verses 50 and 51. And these are the verses that Jehovah's Witnesses use to show that the founding of the world is actually referring to the time of Abel and after Adam and Eve sinned. It says, so that the blood of all the prophets spilled from the founding of the world may be required from this generation, from the blood of Abel down to the blood of Zechariah, who was slain between the altar and the house. Yes, I tell you, it will be required from this generation. From the founding of the world, from the blood of Abel. So again, I'm just going to read what the reasoning book says. Luke 11, verses 50 and 51, Jesus parallels the founding of the world with the time of Abel. Abel's the first human who continued to have God's favor throughout his life. Thus, it was after the rebellion in Eden, but before the conception of Abel, that God formed his purpose to produce a seed. So going back again to the verses that I read earlier, Ephesians chapter 1 verses 4 and 5 says that even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world. Verses 2 Timothy 1 verse 9 uses the word before the ages began. 1 Peter 1 verse 20 uses the word before the foundation of the world. Revelation 13 verse 8 uses the word before. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life. So, the expression founding of the world. If you ask a Jehovah's Witness who founded the world, they're going to say, well, of course, Jehovah. Jehovah and his son, Jesus Christ, founded the world. And it's also interesting to note that the word world and the word earth are used interchangeably. And they each have their own definition according to the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm going to read those definitions. So first off, I'll read the definition of world here, page 435, under the subject world. When translated from the Greek word cosmos, world can mean humankind as a whole, apart from their moral condition of course of life. Number 2, it can mean the framework of human circumstances into which a person is born and in which he lives. Or 3, the mass of mankind apart from Jehovah's approved servants. So it just mentions the Greek word for world, cosmos. And I didn't do a lot of research. I don't know if there's a Hebrew word for world. But it mentions the Greek word cosmos. And just to call to mind a few instances where the world is used in the Greek scriptures. John 3 verse 16. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son for the world. Jesus told his disciples, be no part of the world. Matthew 24 verse 3. Jesus' disciples asked Jesus, what will be the sign of your presence and the conclusion of the system of things? If you look in the King James Version, it says, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? I don't know if cosmos is used in that verse. So they're saying here that the word world is referring to humankind. So when it says God founded the world, to me, I'm thinking it either means after God made the earth or after he made Adam and Eve, which would mean before they sinned. He just finished, the earth is founded. It's done, it's completed. He's put creation on, he's set things in motion, everything, the foundation is laid. But Jehovah's Witnesses are saying that Jehovah founded the earth after they sinned. But the verses here are saying that Jehovah already knew the 144,000 were predestined, the 144,000 being the seed of the woman. They were founded before the founding of the world, that they were chosen and named. So it's important to know when the world was founded. And I'm going to read the definition of earth. Because as I read earlier, Job chapter 38 says, after Jehovah founded the earth, all the sons of God shouted in applause. So it uses the word earth, but it doesn't use the word world. So, but it's using the word founded. And it sounds like this is before Adam and Eve sinned. So the definition of earth, again in the reasoning book here. The term earth is used in more than one sense in the scriptures. Usually we think of it as referring to the planet itself, which Jehovah generously endowed so that it could sustain human life with a view to making our lives richly satisfying. It should be realized, however, that earth also may be used in a figurative sense, referring, for example, to people living on this planet or to a human society that has certain characteristics. So it's similar to world in the sense that it's referring, it can refer to humans. But I found it interesting because they don't say the Greek or the Hebrew word for earth. So if somebody does more research than me, I didn't look too deeply into this. If they want to see if the New World Translation is using earth and world in the right way, I'd be interested to see if how that works. It goes on over the page. It says at Genesis 11 verse 1, 1 Kings chapter 2 verses 1 and 2, 1 Chronicles 16 verse 31, Psalms 96 verse 1, the term earth is used in a figurative sense, referring to mankind, to human society. Might that be the case at 2 Peter 3 verses 7 and 10 and Revelation 21 and 1? 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 7, Peter talks about a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness is to dwell. So it's talking about, not a whole literal earth, but a righteous society, which makes sense. Okay, there's another point I was going to make here. No, I'm going to leave that. So, just going back to this illustration here of the original purpose here. So Jehovah's Witnesses say that Jehovah allowed wickedness to continue because an important issue had been raised by the devil, and that was the issue of sovereignty. And they say that the issues raised were: does Jehovah have the right to rule, and does he exercise his sovereignty in the best interest of his subjects? But when you're giving that many people free will, aren't those issues going to raise themselves? Is the whole world going to stay perfect without any wickedness, without anybody testing their free will? Even if Satan did not raise those issues, aren't those questions going to raise themselves? It's just like a teenager growing up. They test their boundaries. They want to. They want to see what's on the other side. So I'm going to stop it there, and I'm interested in your comments or your feedback and your opinion. Thank you.